6 months since the Capitol insurrection, the Washington Post now says at least a third of Republican candidates who filed to run for Congress have questioned the results of the 2020 presidential election. The news comes as states all across the country are considering or have already passed new voting laws. So what does it all mean for the state of our democracy? Let's break it down with election leaders in two key states: Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, a Republican, and Arizona Secretary of State Katie Hobbs, a Democrat. Thank you both for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Secretary Raffensperger, I'd like to start with you and get your full take on what's happening in Georgia, and then Secretary Hobbs will come to you to talk about Arizona and your perspective. So, Secretary Raffensperger, you defended President Biden's win in your state. You made it clear it was legitimate, and you certified the results despite tremendous pressure from President Trump. But you also now defend Georgia's new voting law. So if you stand by the 2020 results, why do you need this new law?
When I ran in 2018, I said that we need to make sure we have an objective measure for absentee ballot voters. And what I said we need to do is move the driver's license numbers, last four digits of your Social Security number if you don't have that, and then your birthday, day, month, year. And that's what the General Assembly finally put into place here in 2021. So it's something I supported 3 years ago because it's very objective instead of subjective. And it's what's being used right now in Minnesota with the Democrat Secretary of State and also Democrat governor. So I know that that will be sustained if it goes to the Supreme Court. We've also made sure that we've want voters to go to their precinct to voting. That's what was upheld yet last week in the ruling in the Arizona case. And so we're very confident that will be upheld. And then back as soon as I was elected, I made sure we outlawed ballot harvesting to give voters confidence that you wouldn't have people driving up and down the street picking up absentee ballots. And that was upheld also. At the end of the day, what we want to do is we want voters to have confidence in the election process.
Given that you yourself said that the results in 2020 in Georgia were certifiable, they were legitimate, there was no widespread fraud, why do you think you need this new voting law?
Well, you could almost say it's an election integrity vaccine. It's to give voters confidence that their vote will count. When you have your absentee ballot voters identified with driver's license number, what it really does then is everyone knows that they've been 100% verified because you put in your day, month, year, driver's license number, last four digits of your Social Security number. So it really gives voters confidence. And that's what we've really been fighting since I took office back in 2019.
And so what do you say to people who hear that and they say that it's an undue burden on some voters, particularly minority voters, to have to do things like that, to have to provide a driver's license for someone who might not have one?
Well, liberals were saying that when we rolled out photo ID for in-person voting about 10 years ago. What they found out is well over 95% of all Georgians have driver's license number, but we also ask for Social Security number, last four digits, or 4 or 5 other methods of approved HOBBS identification. So it's very easy to register to vote, very easy to have photo ID or approved government ID. And if you don't have any of that, the state will supply UID free of charge.
Now, the Biden Justice Department and the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, are arguing that this law was enacted with the purpose of making it more difficult for Black Georgians to vote because of the voter ID requirements and other sections of the law. What's your response to that?
It's never been easier to register vote, never been easier to vote. If you look at what we did in SB 202, we increased the number of days of early voting from 16 up to 17, required every county, all 159 counties, to have 17 days of early voting. And then counties that want to have Sunday voting can have 2 Sundays of voting. And then we also then obviously have no excuse absentee voting. They kept that in place. And all we did is make sure that we had the appropriate guardrail for voter security and voter identification. So you use driver's license number. This is the same policy that they're using up in Minnesota right now with the Democrat Secretary of State and Democrat governor. How come the DOJ is not suing the Democrats in Minnesota? Why are they picking on Georgia?
So do you disagree that if enacted, this law would result in fewer votes cast by people of color, even if that's not the intent of the law?
Oh, I absolutely disagree with that. I don't think that this law will do anything to hurt any demographic group or any side of the aisle that you're on. It's an objective criteria, and that's what you really want, are objective criteria, nothing that is subjective. When I ran in 2018, I said signature match is subjective. We need to move to an objective criteria, and finally we are.
Now, last week, the Supreme Court decided a major case on voting rights, upholding 2 of Arizona's new voting laws. What's your reaction to that ruling, particularly on things like ballot harvesting? And how does that make you feel about the prospect of having to go to court and defend Georgia's law?
Well, the first thing I did when I got elected is move to a verifiable paper ballot, but also we outlawed ballot harvesting with House Bill 316. And obviously that's going to be upheld because our law is very similar to Arizona's law. Also, we've said that if you, when you show up to vote, we want you to vote in your precinct up to 5 p.m. If you're out of precinct from 5 to 7, then we offer that leeway to voters so that they at least cast their ballots. But when people vote out of precinct, you have to understand that in effect, then their down ballot races don't count. The only things that count are the statewide races. It's unfair to the voters. So that's why we really believe that in precinct voting is the way to go, and really represents really our 200-year history in America.
Now, the latest NPR PBS NewsHour Marist survey found that the majority of Americans are more concerned about making sure people who want to vote can do so than they are about stopping people who are ineligible from voting. What do you think about that? And what are you more concerned about?
I want to make sure that the only people that vote in Georgia elections are Georgians who happen to be American citizens. If you're not an American citizen, you shouldn't be voting any place in America. And we want to make sure that you are a Georgian and 18 or older. So it's a very easy way to register to vote in Georgia. And our criteria are be 18, be a Georgian, be an American citizen. What more could you ask for?
And Secretary Raffensperger, you and your family have faced death threats. I know you've also faced censure from your own party for defending the state's vote count in the 2020 election. The former president is now backing your primary challenger. What do you think about how this has all unfolded so far?
At the end of the day, my job as Secretary of State is to make sure that we have fair and honest elections, that we have the appropriate guardrails of accessibility with security, and that's what we've done. My job isn't to pick winners and losers. My job is to make sure we have fair and honest elections. As a Republican, I'm disappointed when Republicans don't win, but my job is to make sure we have fair and honest elections, and that's what we did in Georgia.
All right, Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, we appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And let's bring in now Arizona Secretary of State Katie Hobbs, who is also running for governor. Secretary Hobbs, again, thank you for your patience as we heard from President Biden there. He has said that democracy is under attack when it comes to new voting laws. You've said democracy is under siege since the 2020 election, and that Arizona needs federal intervention when it comes to these new state GOP-backed voting laws. But the Supreme Court last week upheld one law in Arizona banning absentee ballot collection outside of family and caregivers, and another law tossing out ballots cast in the wrong precinct. So what's the impact here in your eyes?
Well, this is very unfortunate for Arizona voters. These were laws that were already on the books, but they were unnecessary laws. They are unnecessary laws. They just put hurdles in front of Arizona voters in terms of their access to the ballot. And so we're going to continue to work to ensure the fairness and integrity of our elections, fight against new laws that create more unnecessary burdens for voters. But I'm more worried about the impact across the country because of the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act that is impacted by this ruling that will make it harder for voters in any state to challenge discriminatory election laws in the courts.
Your Republican Governor Doug Ducey described the new laws as good policy that will free up resources for local officials, save money, and strengthen trust in our election system. What's your response to that?
Well, the laws that were struck down are not actually new laws. They've been on the books for a while, and they are just unnecessary hurdles for voters. There was no evidence of fraud taking place that necessitated the laws being enacted. I fought against the ballot collection law when it was passed in the Senate, and these laws do nothing to uphold election integrity, nor do the laws that this governor has signed into law this legislative session that are based on the big lie from the 2020 election.
Well, let's talk about that controversial and infamous audit. Maricopa County officials have announced they'll be replacing voting machines that were turned over to a private contractor as part of that audit. Is that the right call, and how much will this cost?
It's absolutely the right call. And what we're focused on here is the issue of chain of custody. And the chain of custody of that equipment was lost by certified election officials. And so when we have that equipment in our custody, or the counties do, we know what happens to it. We know where it goes. There's access logs, all those things. That was lost here. And so the chain of custody was irreparably broken, and those machines are not usable again. That is not my opinion. That is coming from CISA and the federal government in terms of general guidance about election equipment. So the original contract for Maricopa County with this equipment was $6 million. I think that's what they're looking at in terms of replacing it.
Let's catch our viewers up. You have been in legal battle after legal battle since the election there in 2020. Republican legislators also took the unusual move of stripping your office of the right to defend state election laws in court. They slipped that into the budget signed last week, and it just happens to end right when your term is up. So what do you say to Arizona voters who are concerned about partisanship? And do Democrats and Republicans just have different ideas about voter access and voter security?
Well, I certainly think there are different ideas, but the bottom line here is that this was a blatantly retaliatory move by the Republicans, led by the Attorney General, who don't like the way that I've done my job. But we're going to continue to do our job, regardless of the hurdles that they continue to put in front of us. We're going to fight for free and fair elections in Arizona. We're going to uphold the election laws that are in place that we upheld during the 2020 election. That's what we're going to continue to do. But Arizonans are tired of this partisanship, and that's one of the reasons I'm running for governor, to put the partisanship aside and tackle real problems, not continue to rehash an election that somebody doesn't like the results of. And if folks want to join me in that fight, they can do that at katiehobbs.org.
And on voter ID, you have to use your ID for a lot of things, you know, buying alcohol, cigarettes, getting on a plane, renting a car, just to name a few there. So what do you say to people who think showing ID to vote is no big deal and will help prevent voter fraud?
Well, voter ID is not in question in Arizona. It is the law. We do require it, and it's been in place for years here. So it's not a question here in Arizona, and anyone who says otherwise, it's been in place and has been for the last several elections. Voters who vote in person have to show valid ID that's listed on our website, and voters who vote by mail confirm their identity with their signature on the ballot affidavit.
Let's go back to the governor there, your Republican governor, Doug Ducey. You mentioned some other laws that he was enforcing and calling good policy, but there were new laws that he signed into law that limiting when voter signatures can be fixed. Another purges infrequent mail voters from early voting mailing lists. Do you expect these will have a substantive impact? Do you expect Congress or the courts to step in here?
I don't necessarily expect any intervention right now unless something like the For the People Act is passed that sets federal minimums in terms of ballot access. But again, these are unnecessary laws that were fixing things that weren't broken and just continue to put unnecessary hurdles in front of voters and will very likely disproportionately impact voters of color, younger voters, people with disabilities, and there was no reason for them in the first place.
And speaking of that federal intervention, you've been putting pressure on your fellow Democrat, Kristen Sinema there, the senator from Arizona, to act as well.
Well, I've said to every elected member of Congress that every leader should step up and fight for our democracy right now, and that is what is at stake with these restrictions on voting across the country that the For the People Act will help to address. And it is really necessary to ensure Americans' continued access to the ballot. And right now there are 50 Republicans and some Democrats in the Senate blocking that. We need our leaders to step up and do what's right for America.
All right, Secretary Hobbs there in Arizona. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.